Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my second live edition on True Frequency Network. Today's date is June 1st, 2013. If you still don't know me, my name is Natalie Marie, and my radio show is called Crystal Kids Radio. I'm only 13 years old. I would also like to thank Chris Gio from True Frequency Network for helping me on my new website, and Kristen Gio for making it possible to be on True Frequency Network. I would also like to thank my affiliates from Unbound Radio for podcasting my show. Today, we have a pre-recorded show. My interview today is with two really fun people. They were the most sweetest couple I have ever met. It is not every day you meet people like them. Their names are Freeman Fly and Jamie Hanshaw. Freeman is a TV producer, filmmaker, lecturer, and talk show host of A Freeman Perspective. His wife, Jamie, also studies the occult activities of secret societies, magic, and Hollywood trauma-based mind control. Freeman and his lovely wife address issues that opened my eyes. I didn't even know these things were really happening. We talked about Hollywood. I blame Hollywood for selling women as sex slaves, destroying the family unit, drug use, experimental sex, selfishness, crime, and so much more. I don't even have a stomach to say. Today is a landmark interview because I was bullied and told not to have Freeman and Jamie on my show by individuals. They threatened my parents, bullied me, and tried to completely control my show. They told me who not to interview and who to interview. They wanted me to become a puppet. They are telling to you that they have a solution for stopping wars, like agreements and laws that you know yourself they are always broken. How are you doing?
We're doing really good.
That's great. How are you, Jamie?
I'm great, thank you.
Okay, that's good. How did you meet?
How did we meet?
Yeah.
First time I ever heard of Freeman was on a website, and someone posted a link to his show, and they said, this guy needs a sandwich, because he was so thin. And so I listened to his show, and I became a Freeman fan, and I friended him on MySpace, and we kind of wrote a couple letters back and forth, and he wasn't very talkative over the internet. You know, his answers to my letters were kind of like one-word replies, you know, but I kept trying, and we made friends when I lived in California, and he lived in Austin, Texas. So one day I went to visit my brother who lived in Dallas, and I drove down to meet him, and never left, really. That was the end of that story.
How was it letting her go?
Oh, that's so beautiful, your story.
Thank you.
So how did you guys get started?
Well, maybe like you, I was an old soul and kind of popped in on this planet, kind of unawares of earthling type situation. I always seemed to be a bit of an alien. I never really fit in. I didn't speak to people until the 6th grade. And then when I finally started to look into things, my whole life I've been interested in ancient astronauts and UFOs. And it's been something from the Bermuda Triangle on that I've read about, studied, and just, you know, was infatuated with as a kid. Well, later I found out that my dad was involved in Freemasonry and was actually the Grand Poobah or worshipful master of Freemasonry, or a particular one. You know, there's Freemason lodges everywhere, and every lodge has a worshipful master. So he was the worshipful master in Kaiserslautern. But as a Freemason, he gets all the cool jobs. So he was actually on a killer submarine with Jimmy Carter and was chasing flying saucers for Project Blue Book. So by college, I started to learn about Freemasonry. I knew none of this about my dad, but I was already well interested in the topics. But in college, I was introduced to the ideas of magic, ceremonial magic, and the Freemasons. And I recognized immediately the signs and symbols that I had seen in my dad's top drawer, which was the compass, square, and G of Freemasonry. So my friend's like, well, your dad's a Freemason. And I'm like, no way. You know, because he had told me all this crazy stuff about them already. And I'm like, no, not my dad. So I went and questioned him, and sure enough, yeah, I found out he was involved in all of this, including chasing flying saucers. and told me, yeah, flying saucers are real. So then I was just kind of left dumbfounded. This, of course, was in college. It was about 1993, and so being, once again, not very used to Earth-like habits, I just kind of took off and started wandering the United States. I was selling juggling sticks. I was juggling my way across the country with a little dog. And as I did, I was studying and reading and learning. I read things like Zecharia Sitchin and the 12th Planet and many other of these things on this vein, ancient astronauts, Eric von Daniken, things like that. And I began telling the tale as I knew it across the United States to just anyone that would listen while I was out juggling. Well, eventually this walking, talking led me to Austin, Texas, and of course this was another decade down the road. And by then I had managed to predict that W would be forced into office, that there would be a major terrorist attack on 9/11, and that the next president would be questioned as far as his eligibility. So I'd already produced and predicted all these things and looked into the fact that Saddam Hussein believed he was Nebuchadnezzar reincarnated, and all the strange things going on. And I started telling this story. Well, so one day I ended up in Austin, Texas, and by this time I was a glass blower, so I was selling my glass, and I got invited by a homeless man to a talk at a mall in Austin, Texas. And so I said, all right, and I went. And it was a guy who was supposedly an ex-Bilderberger, ex-secret ruler of the world, and Jimmy Carter's financial advisor. His name's George Green. And he was giving a talk on these extraterrestrials from Pleiades, who had been visiting Billy Meyer in Switzerland. And he had met with these, what they call now Plagiarians. They changed their name, I don't know why. But he met with them, and he became the publisher of their books, which were called Handbook for a New Paradigm. And so he handed me a copy of this book and, thanked me for coming, and I started telling my side of the picture. And I blew away everyone in the room, not meaning to, I was just talking. And this tall man walks up to me, and he says, "You need a TV show." And I was like, yeah, that would be cool. And he's like, would you do it? And I said, well, yeah, I guess I would. And he said, well, here's $180. Go down to Austin Access and get yourself a TV show. Now, I'd only planned on being in Austin for the weekend. And I ended up staying 5 years doing the Freeman perspective on Austin Access, which led to everything else.
Wow.
I kind of got started when I was about your age, Natalie, because like you, I had some exceptional parents who were pretty vigilant in world news and politics, and knowing that, there's such things as FEMA camps. My mom would go to the Bible bookstore and rent VHS tapes for us to watch, and they would be about Clinton chronicles and drug scandals and FEMA camps and
black helicopters,
all the different conspiracies going around in the 90s. So I just kind of grew up with that way of thinking, and then everything that I learned just kind of falls into that. So I never had instant awakening process. It was just kind of like a growth of knowledge and a background of my parents supporting me in this.
When I first started my show, I met a sweet couple, and they happened to be singers. Chris, who is from the Social Animals, was an Australian who came to Canada but stayed in Canada legally. He ended up marrying a Canadian woman, but they ended up having a lot of problems because he was an illegal alien. So the immigration police in Canada put him in jail that resembled a FEMA camp. What he said to me was there was families put in this FEMA camp for many months with children. They had visitors. The only thing they were allowed to give them was diapers. They didn't go outside for very long, and they were mistreated.
Wow. Yeah, FEMA camps is so obvious. I mean, people should look that up and see how many there actually are, and how many railroads they've built, and how many boxcars they've ordered with shackles, and how many depots that they have set up. And why? Ask people, why would they have this if
and we're planning on using it?
Exactly.
Actually, right in Kansas City, there's a major complex in the highway set up there where I'm certain is the major deportation site for the trains. It seems, too built up for just a regular old overpass, and yeah.
Yes. In the month of February, Hollywood has an award for the movie industry called the Oscars. A bunch of movie people go home with these statuettes. Do they know that the Oscar statuette is probably an Art Deco version of the creator god Ptah? In the Egyptian mythology, Ptah was an important figure of Egyptian magic, and now we are so lucky he is back with an updated look and a new name, Oscar. Can you tell my audience a bit about Oscar?
Well, it's interesting that the Oscars are held in the Kodak Theater, which is downtown Hollywood, right next to the Grauman's Chinese Theater, or the Mann's Chinese Theater, they call it now. But the courtyard adjacent to that Kodak Theater is called the Babylon Courtyard.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you go back to ancient Babylon, that is the roots of what we're calling trauma-based mind control or generational satanic ritual abuse right now. Has its roots in Nimrod and Babylon. So there's this giant gate in the courtyard called the Ishtar Gate, which has two interesting gods on it. One on the left is Enki, one of the Anunnaki. He's the one holding a pot of water. And he was one of the brothers that they describe in the Sishin works as the Anunnaki who came here to genetically modify people to create a slave race for them.
Mm-hmm. Really? What do you think about Lady Gaga getting a wheelchair that looks like something you would get from the movie Tim Burton's Corpse Bride?
Well, if you watch Lady Gaga's video called Marry the Night, it's a pretty long video, a music video, but there's a big part in the beginning where she's being wheeled through an institution on a gurney, and she's explaining to you about the trauma-based mind control that she's just been through. Saying she has to go back in her memory and fill in the ugly parts with something beautiful. And she says that she's imagining that the nurses are dressed in designer clothes, and so she's pretty much describing what it's like to come out of a trauma session. And this is something that they're glamorizing right now, is institutions, mental institutions. Also, there's a part in the Katy Perry video called Wide Awake, and this tells kind of the same story about false rebellion when they think they've broken up from the mind control, but they're just right back in it where they started. She's pictured in a wheelchair too. So this definitely has to do with the trauma going on in the institutions and what they have to go through and who's involved actually, and it's the doctors and nurses.
Mm-hmm.
They want you to desire to be these people. And when you start to really dig into Hollywood, as I did with Anna Nicole and Brittany, you learn that trauma-based mind control is at the heart of celebritydom. And so to present to the world this golden wheelchair is a carrot to try and direct more people to want to enter the trauma-based mind control system we call Hollywood or celebritydom.
Mm-hmm. You're so right. Now I want to talk more about Lady Gaga. In 2012, she sang at the Grammys. This time I could safely say she was the corpse bride, but the sad thing was that there was a real corpse, and that would be Whitney Houston, who was murdered on that day. How sad is it that kids like myself are watching the show and finding out somebody on that day was murdered? There was no respect for Whitney Houston who had just died. Lady Gaga on that day performed a magical ritual. Maybe this magic turned into karma for the person who sang it. The victim would be Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga is forced to promote mind control. Let's look at another thing. She could become the next victim like Whitney Houston because Hollywood has no heart. Because they killed Elvis Presley and Michael Jackson. What do you think, since you know all about mind control?
Well, the really interesting tale there with Whitney Houston was that her daughter had also drowned in that same bathtub the night before. So this was going on at a time of a date within the esoteric realms of a water goddess. And her daughter had taken drugs and fallen asleep or passed out in the tub and was rushed to the hospital to be returned that night. When she came back, she then found that her mother drowned in the exact same bathtub and was rushed to the hospital again for the trauma that she had just suffered for having her mother drowned in front of her. Then the odd thing of them keeping Whitney Houston's body in the room while, what was his name? Clive Davis's party was
going on.
The whole
industry party downstairs while she was dead in the bathtub, and he wouldn't allow the police to remove the body until after the party was over.
Which they had plenty of time to remove it before the party began, which is, so that is where you start to get to the ideas of necromancy or ritual magic dealing with death. I mean, Lady Gaga is a classic example of how they are bringing this stuff to the forefront and now making it just fashionable in popular culture, yeah.
You're so right. Roseanne Barr said on the Larry King Show that they implanted a chip on her. With this chip, they monitored her as part of the MK Ultra. Do they implant chips in entertainers?
No. They'll use implants they use people from all walks of life. So it could be your next door neighbor, it could be your pastor, and they want to put people in prominent positions, not just as actors, but as pillars of the community.
And hopefully soon we'll know more from Roseanne Barr herself, because she just got a copy of Weird Stuff and might be joining up with the Freeman TV network.
Wow, really?
Yeah, Roseanne Barr is really good friends with Kathy O'Brien, who wrote Transformation of America, and we met her in Philadelphia at the Free Your Mind conference. So Kathy introduced us to Roseanne, and Roseanne got our book, and she's really excited about being friends and working together.
Wow, I can't believe it.
On our trip in the school bus, we actually met a doctor that removes chips from people's brains and heads and hands, and also was a specialist in Morgellons. This silicon-based disease that has strange fibers growing up out of your body. But when we met this doctor, you had to get a special referral to see her, and she showed us all kinds of images of nanotechnologies that would gather inside of somebody's body and then form into shapes. And she showed us x-rays, where you could see one formed into a dragon, others formed into weird symbols and sigils. And I was just blown away to have a doctor standing there showing me this stuff.
That's so amazing. Marilyn Monroe was an MK Ultra slave. Her bedroom where she died was painted completely white with no decor in a cramped, square room. It had the feel of a hospital room. She was not allowed to have any self-esteem beyond what she was programmed for. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, Marilyn Monroe is an interesting story because she was the first presidential model, public presidential model, mind control slave for John F. Kennedy. And her life is just a perfect case study, like Britney Spears, of what's going on in this trauma-based mind control. There's reports that her house was full of mirrors. They wouldn't let her have a social life. The only thing she could do was go to her doctor's appointments. They took her babies away from her.
Yeah.
There's a really good expose on this on VigilantCitizen.com right now. He just wrote a part one about life.
Yeah, that's where I got it.
Okay.
In the article that I read, Marilyn said, "Don't take my baby." So they took my baby from me, and I never saw it again. Marilyn did have a healthy baby. It was taken away from her, and she was never allowed to see it. What do you think could have happened to the baby?
It wouldn't surprise me if it was another person that you've heard of that you didn't know that was Marilyn's daughter. They just gave it a new name and a new persona and put it back out there to work for them. I don't know who it is, but that wouldn't surprise me.
Well, one of the most amazing things about this whole story is the genetic connection, the bloodlines. As you start to look into the elite, you find that Madonna's related to Hillary, that Cheney's related to Britney, that Bush is related to, a number of others. And they all relate back to Vlad the Impaler, who is, of course, Count Dracula. But the genetic start of this whole situation of these trauma-based mind control victims is critical, because those are the ones that seem to be able to make the connection or the contact with these otherworldly beings. So when you start to look into the Monarch program, the entire reason it's called the Monarch program is due to the fact that it takes generations of butterflies to get to their mating lands. And the question came up, how did the next generation know to continue on and go to this one particular mating place when, they die off in 3 generations to finally get there. So this spurred the idea of the Monarch program and why it's titled Monarch. And it is the idea of the genetics connecting to these trauma-based mind control victims. It's very interesting.
That's why they love a monarch butterfly so much, because of this MK Ultra?
Yes, exactly. And the idea of genetic memory is one that has struck me many times, because like I was saying with my dad being involved in all the things that I was already studying, it was a shock, because it was as I discovered things that he actually told me that he was involved, not the other way around. And the idea of genetic memory is proven in the concepts of like putting an owl up on a building so that the birds won't land. Those birds most likely have never seen an owl or been attacked by an owl, but their genetic memory tells them that that's a bird of prey.
You're so right. Marilyn did not even own a television or a radio. Marilyn had no contact with outside, not even with her family members. They wanted to ensure that their mind control would work. They were afraid that something might go wrong with the first presidential slave at work was allowed to be highly visible to the public. Could you tell us more about that?
Well, don't you think it's interesting how her iconic status has lasted, 60 years or more? I mean, Megan Fox had a Marilyn Monroe tattoo on her, and she had to get it removed because she said it was bringing her bad luck.
Yeah.
But everywhere you go in Hollywood, it's the same people that they use as these perfect models. Marilyn Monroe, James Dean, Elvis.
When you look at Elvis's life, he had kind of the opposite spectrum where he was never left alone. Elvis never had a moment alone. And he thought he was in communication with extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional beings or what the Great White Brotherhood, and believed that he could kill anyone he wanted to and have people murdered and do whatever is necessary to bring himself out as the Lord.
Interesting thing about Elvis was that it was reported that he traveled with a trunk full of esoteric books, over 200 esoteric books that he never went anywhere without, including books on theosophy, Madame Blavatsky, occult Manly P. Hall books. So he was into these different kinds of studies, and he actually thought that he was kind of a Christ, because what they were telling him was that he had superpowers. He would go out on the balcony and tell it to stop raining, and it would stop raining, and they would say, "Look, Elvis, you're a god."
They call him the king.
Right. And who else did they call the king? Michael Jackson.
Yeah. Freeman, you talked about Anna Nicole Smith in the beginning of the show. She suffered the same fate as Marilyn. I read that in the 1990s she was a very big name, and she was the first to start a reality show. For those who do not know her, she was an American model, actress, and television personality. Smith first gained popularity in Playboy, becoming in the 1993 Playmate of the Year. She modeled for clothing companies, including Guess Jeans. She married J. Howard Marshall, 2 years her senior. Can you tell us more about her?
Yeah, absolutely. I do have a 2.5-hour documentary on Anna Nicole and her death.
Really?
And yeah, it's called Anna Nicole, Brittany, and Mind Control.
Wow.
Most of it you can watch on freemantv.com, but to get the full documentary, you got to buy the DVD. But the thing of this situation is, okay, first of all, Anna Nicole's history. Let's look at how she is presented to us. She came from a trailer park, got up on a stripper pole, and then married a billionaire. Well, Hannah Montana, coming out on the Child Teen Choice Awards, did the exact same thing. On her stage performance, she comes out of a trailer, she gets on top of a stripper pole that's mounted on an ice cream cart, and begins to sing Party in the USA for the teens, right? So this idea, again, like Lady Gaga's golden wheelchair, the idea that there's the elite and then there is us. Hannah Montana is a perfect example of that when she plays Miley Stewart and then she becomes the illustrious Hannah Montana. You know, there's the lowly you, and then there's the elite them, right? So this is programming the children to believe in the classes. But now Anna Nicole's story gets so strange. As you say, she married J. Howard Marshall.
Yes.
Who was, 90? And, of course, J. Howard Marshall was a Nazi oil tycoon with $1 billion. But it was my belief, and still is, that the money that was garnished from his death, the billions of dollars, was not set to go to Anna Nicole, but to her daughter, Danny Lynn. Now, when Anna Nicole had Danny Lynn, there was much questions as to the parentage. Who was the daddy? Who was the daddy? And this came up largely in the court case trying to decide where Anna Nicole's body should be buried. Because if you remember, Howard Cage Stern had basically ganked her and brought her to the Bahamas. Mm-hmm. And under Bohemian law, the person on the birth certificate is the father, and that would be Howard K. Stern. But in America, the biological father has all of the legal status, and that, they said, was Larry Burkhead, right? Mm-hmm. But as I started digging into this puzzle, I came across a curious character named Prince Frederick von Anhalt. And he adamantly claims that Danny Lynn was his child due to a little, what he said was a night that no one remembers. Most likely an eyes wide shut type party where Anna Nicole was being passed around as a sexual slave. And Prince Frederick von Anhalt claimed to be the daddy. Now, when I began to look into who is this character, Prince Frederick von Anhalt, I came to the studies and understandings of the boys from Brazil, or the Nazi experiments to bring back Hitler. So they had saved a sample of Hitler's semen, and they used this to impregnate his girlfriend's sister, Gretel Braun. So Adolf Hitler was with Eva Braun, but she was dead. Hitler was dead, but Gretel Braun still lived. So according to this story, they took Adolf Hitler's semen and impregnated Gretel Braun, which produced Adolf's child, Prince Frederick von Anhalt. So if what Prince Frederick von Anhalt is saying is true, that he is the father of Danny Lynn, then that means she is the granddaughter of Adolf Hitler, who has now been given $1 billion from a Nazi oil tycoon. Mm-hmm. And she was put through a moonchild ritual, which is that when she was born, 3 days after her birth, her brother, Daniel Smith, was brought into the hospital room and dropped dead in front of her. Mm-hmm. 3 months after she was born, she was brought into Anna Nicole's room, and Anna Nicole dropped dead in front of her. So she had the death of the firstborn and the death of the mother happen in front of her, which I believe is a moonchild ritual to then bring an entity, a god form, into this child who now has Nazi money.
Moonchild is a book by Aleister Crowley, and its subtitle is called The Butterfly Net. That's an interesting...
Wow, I didn't know. It seems like Hollywood likes to use lots of symbolism and dates.
Well, within these generational families, there's a lot of importance on dates and days and seasons and cycles. You know, every witch's calendar has their sacred days, and
even Prince William was induced to be born on June 21st?
Yeah. So part of, some bloodline that practiced this ritual abuse, then I don't see why that would be something bizarre, because they're always trying to tailor these embryos to make them moon children, or what they want them to be.
But women today are disconnected. You cannot trust your friend. Clothing is very important. They are killing off care and destroying the motherhood. I had a teacher that was teaching us that marriage was not a good thing. What do you think about that?
I think teachers are so off base right now that it's pretty scary. I just saw a video on YouTube yesterday of a student trying to teach his teacher how to teach, and she was just trying to kick him out and tell him to go to the principal's office, and she wouldn't listen to him. So there's this whole thing about authority, which I really, really hate the concept of authority. I've always had a problem with it, and of teachers and standardized testing, and also standardized curriculums, which is something my mom fought for in the 90s, you know, the non-standardization of these tests. So it's like the mind control is spread out through the school system because every public school has to have the same curriculums and books, and they're all from up above. I can't really name the organizations that, you know, write the textbooks, but, you know, if they're all coming from one place, then they're pretty much like Tavistock or some other population controlling technique society.
It's actually all coming from what's known as the Club of Rome, who wrote Limits to Growth.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been indoctrinating the teachers since since long before I was in college, with these type of UN programs.
Anti-family.
And anti-family, yeah.
Anti-family units. So it's statism. It's worship of the state, and whatever we tell you is right instead of your parents. You know, your parents are dumb and they're backwards and they don't know and they're not as hip as you. So teachers are giving their opinions and teaching kids about things that their family should be teaching them, not.
Yeah, you're so right, Jamie. But why are teachers like doing this? Like, teachers back then, like, and probably like before, maybe in your grandmother's generation, would never, and grandparents' generation would never do, like, the teachers would never say, oh, marriage is not a good thing. Actually, it was the opposite. Imagine if they came today, they would be so disgusted.
Yeah.
They would be shocked. I mean, if they saw how many 666s and satanic symbols that we now just take as normal everyday life, they would be blown away by the amount of violence in our culture, the amount of things that we look at, the gore.
I'm scandalized by popular culture every day, and
Me
I'm
too.
only 31.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with Leave It to Beaver.
I feel like a grandma when I walk down the street and say, what are they up to? You know, like, it's just crazy how compressed the quote-unquote liberation has come, and how fast they can, you know, just bombard us with these.
And a big part of this whole situation is to set up the culture, and so, you know, they have been indoctrinated through scholasticism all their time. They're ruled by the fact that they'll get, you know, thrown out of their jobs, so everybody keeps the status quo to keep their job. But I wanted to say something else, and I forgot.
Teachers have no say over what they teach. You know, it's all standardized testing now. They just get the students ready to answer the questions that the government wants them to answer, and properly programmed with the statism. And another thing about this is I really hate organized sports in the school system. Like, I think it's just the beginning of a Spartan type of dedication to the state, and actually propagates warfare and us and them mentality.
It really does. I mean, you get beat up for being in a different school.
At school, I got bullied by the teachers and principal over a hockey game school trip. They turned it into a nightmare. I was getting bullied at that same time, and they did not make an issue over that, but that hockey game touched a nerve.
Right. Well, guess what the highest paid position, non-governmental position is in the United States right now?
What?
It's a football or basketball coach.
Really?
In every single state, they have the highest paid salary of anyone else.
Oh.
Because sports, grandizes fighting and just sets them up to join the military.
Like the Roman Empire, right? And even in the Greek times, they had the Olympics, which was like now kind of thing. They were kind of always like, you know, they had so much sports back then, and it's happening again. It seems like if you look at history and now, you could put them together.
Well, let's take it this way. In Roman times, they had around 323 days of the games. And that was an escalation at the fall of Rome. So they started with, you know, just some games, but then as the empire crumbled, they had built all the way up to 323 days of the games a year. Now, in America, we have 364 days of the games. There is only one day that I know of that does not have a sporting event, and that follows the All-Star baseball game. So, we have now outdone the Roman Empire in the collapse of the Roman Empire.
Really?
And it is a clear sign that we're at the collapse of the American Empire.
Interesting that, the beginning of sports came from Sparta, and I don't know if you've seen that movie 300, where they're all yelling, "This is Sparta." And what they would do is they would take the boys very young, and they would put them through these trials and tribulations to toughen them up. They would separate them from their mother, put them in an all-boys school, force them to compete in brutal games, and they would be naked at the time. And they were also assigned a male sponsor who would supposed to be leading them through their life of becoming a warrior, but there's also some, homosexual overtones in that as well.
Now the men in the Dior fashion show are dressing up like women.
That's a part of the acting that came up through Greece, because they did not allow women to act on the stage. And most of this has been perpetrated through the secret societies. That you'll find that many of the Freemasons and the elite dress up as women often. Rumsfeld, you could see.
J. Edgar Hoover.
J. Edgar Hoover, yeah.
He was a mind control handler.
He just liked dressing up as a woman.
Really?
Well, there's a good story told by Dave Chappelle about how all the black actors who want to make it in Hollywood have to put on a dress. And so they have to do some kind of movie, like Big Mama's House, or, they have to cross-dress.
Like
It's a rite of passage, and it's also a degradation of men, and especially black men.
Mm-hmm.
So Dave Chappelle actually lost his career because he refused to dress up as a woman, and he quit because he wouldn't play their game.
Well, there was a lot more to the Chappelle conspiracy than that, but yeah. Well, this really goes back to Aleister Crowley's his ideas of the aeon of the crowned and conquering child. You see, Aleister Crowley is the heart of the 20th century. He founded the ideas of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. He was known as the Beast 666 and was a member of numerous secret societies, including the Freemasons or the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis, which is a sex cult, and also his own trauma-based cult known as the AA. So when we start to look, he predicted or prophesied, or he actually channeled information from an interdimensional being named Voss, that told him that the Age of Horus would be Epicene in nature, that we would become more homosexual, and that this would be the state of affairs, and it actually has come very true. I'll be giving an in-depth talk about this June 1st and 2nd at Conspiracy Con in California.
I find they're trying to divide us by saying you're not the right color, religion, and sexuality.
Yeah, if you look at the situation right now, we have Pope Francis, who just came into power after Pope Benedict quit. Now, he is a staunch opponent to homosexuality and gay marriage. Now, at the same time that he was being put in power, Obama came out with his, I believe it was State of the Union or the inaugural address, I'm not sure which, in which he fondly talked about openly having gay marriage in his inaugural speech. And so we have these two opponents right now, the Jesuit Pope and Barack Obama. And America is being depicted to the world as the Satan of the world. And that's why they've got everybody believing we're honey boo-boos and, bridezillas and whatnot.
Yeah. What they are saying to tweens in the movie industry is to fall in love with a vampire and marry one. For example, Twilight. What do you think about that?
That, in my opinion, has to go back to the reptilian agenda. So if you watch Katy Perry's video E.T., it's a song about her love affair with an extra-dimensional entity that she begs for them to abduct her and, fill her with the poison. And so there's been a lot of vampires coming back into the scene. And so I think that the vampire and the reptilian thing go hand in hand because they have a lot in common, with the blood drinking and eternal life and other things like that. So I think they're trying to get girls to fall in love with the dark side, basically. wanting to be a princess, and then when you find out what royalty is, then you find out they're vampires and maybe, extra-dimensional reptilian entities. So I think that they want the girls to accept that before they reveal themselves. And there's a Greek story about Cupid and Psyche. So, Cupid, the god of love, he wants to marry the most beautiful girl named Psyche, and he abducts her, and he mates with her without her having seen him. And when she goes to look at his form, it causes, drama in the Mount Olympus. But Psyche actually is depicted as a girl with butterfly wings as well. So it's all wrapped up in this getting girls to accept the vampirism, accept the dark side, accept the reptilian, and then when they find out, there's no escape.
Yeah. I love a ballet and opera. I'm probably the only kid in North America that loves the classics. I love to listen to Luciano Pavarotti, Andrea Bocelli, Mozart, and operas. My favorite one is La Baronne, by the way. What makes me so angry is what Hollywood did with the ballet Swan Lake. This beautiful artwork was written by a composer by the name of Tchaikovsky. I was a ballerina, and I performed it at Swan Lake. Then I heard that they made this horrific movie called Black Swan, which is an intense psychological thriller describing a ballet dancer's transformation into a black swan. Behind the movie's freaky cover-up lies a deep explanation of the cost of fame, the sacrifice of artists, and hidden forces behind the shady world of high-stakes entertainment. Could you tell us more about that, Jamie and Freeman?
There's a lot of talk about selling your soul. So it seems like to make it in this business, there has to be some part of you that you're willing to give up. If you haven't been brought up, as a MK person and put in the spotlight, then if you want to make it, you have to join their club, basically. You have to, there's a lot of research been done about how lots of rappers have people dying around them as soon as they make it big, because there's a sacrifice that's necessary.
Yeah, even Bill Cosby had a death in the family when he made it. And Professor Griff gives a great explanation of all the different stars, the black stars that had to sacrifice, or, he says that but there has been absolutely a mysterious death involved with a family member for everyone that has made it in that community from Bill on through this whole situation. Natalie Portman is absolutely one that is programming trauma-based mind control into the system through many of her movies. And, of course, we always want to remind people that these people are victims as well. I consider George W. Bush a victim. And so when we start to see them, being used like this, we can't blame them. How many people said hateful statements about Anna Nicole or about Britney? And it's not their fault, they're trapped in a horrific world that you couldn't even believe. But Natalie Portman, she's come out in so many different ways. Black Swan, you'll see all kinds of trauma-based symbolism in there with the broken mirrors and the black and whites and the dualities and these
her
ideas.
Alter personalities that she runs into.
Right, the alter. And then also in V for Vendetta, when you start to look into that situation. Now, V for Vendetta was written by Alan Moore, and it was produced by a company called Village Roadshow, which also produced The Matrix. And their symbol, actually, the 6 V's, is the Kabbalistic symbol for the other dimension, or the abyss, as they call it. But V for Vendetta, the actual comic book, is based on the belief systems of Adam Weishaupt, the Jesuit who began the Illuminati, coupled with the sex magic and trauma-based mind control of the Ordo Templi Orientis, or of Aleister Crowley. So if you actually read V for Vendetta, you'll see that that's what this is. And when you look to the storyline itself, you find out that they tell you after V abducts Evie and traumatizes her, and if it were a truthful tale, he would have raped her and done many other heinous things to her, breaking fingers, breaking bones, doing any kind of trauma, to finally release her from her emotions, which is critical to this the brotherhood that want to rule. And then at the end of the movie, V releases her from the jail cell, and when she's ready to die, when she no longer cares to live at all, he releases her and says, there, now you're free. So this is the idea that they are trying to program into us. You can see a lot of movies. I look at Disney movies. People are looking at subliminals in Disney, but the tale right there in the story is what you should be looking at. Disney's been used for military propaganda since the creation of their studios.
Actually, J. Edgar Hoover chased Walt Disney around trying to get him involved in this, and he finally managed to over the doubts that Disney had about his parentage and his birth certificate. So the FBI agreed to help him find his real parents if he would unite with them and allow them to use Disneyland for military purposes, and also do filming at FBI headquarters for the Mickey Mouse Club.
And so you'll actually see that all of these stars that we've talked about, from Madonna to Michael Jackson to Britney, have all been working for Disney. And you'll find that the very storylines that come forward, such as The Little Mermaid, which had a golden penis on the cover, tells the tale of a girl who wants to make it in the world, you know, and was ready to give up, or she wanted a man, ready to give up her only talent, and so she was required to sell it to a black witch, and sell her only talent to a black witch in order to be given the gift of getting legs to be with this man. Or we go to Tangled, which, subliminally on the poster has the word sex, but the story should be what's more critical to people, in that it's teaching that this child, her mother, who won't let her go out with the thief, is actually a soul-sucking witch, and the girl is secretly a princess. And so you start to look into what they're programming into our children through these Hollywood, and most specifically the Walt Disney productions.
Yes.
It all tells this very tale.
Christina Aguilera had a song called Genie in a Bottle, like the 1960 series I Dream of Jeannie.
Yeah. When she said, you have to rub me the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there you have it again with all these little children singing that song, never even really realizing what they were singing about. I was guilty of this at 10 when I was singing along to Kiss, never realizing that I was singing about rape. But now we have Katy Perry, I Kissed a Girl, or, the more recent one where E.T., where she's saying, I want to be abducted, I want to be a victim, give me a supernatural baby.
We know someone who used to be on Young and the Restless. He's a friend of ours from California, and he was on the soap opera for many years, and he said that they just kept trying to make his character the worst person possible, from killing babies to pretending he was gay. He had to kiss a man on screen, and so he just had to quit because they kept trying to take his character in ways that he just couldn't agree with, even fictitiously. So he had to give it all up.
And you see this in many of the stars, like Matthew McConaughey, having to come out in that Killer movie. And
Killer Joe.
Yeah,
awful.
Be basically a pedophile murderer. And he's a character that they've always played off as this happy-go-lucky fellow that everybody wanted to be. So they take these characters, they embed them in our soul, and then they tear them down and turn them into the most despicable beings that they can come up with.
Why were the classic movies better? Old movies were better to watch. Back then, the director made a movie because they had a wonderful idea with a storyline. Now they make movies because it is time to make one with no plot. They add nudity, a lot of special effects, and scary to watch. They start introducing a rating system. Now they are out of control. Don't get me started with television. It has been going down for hill for years. They show more how to kill somebody and reality shows. Imagine what that does to your mind. After that, let's not forget about the commercials. The pharmaceutical companies tell you that you need a pill to stop whatever disease, and the side effects are worse than the disease. How can you trust these people?
I gotta share something with you. We were watching a Disney TV show, a children's show called Jessie, and it was about a mermaid's funeral. And they suddenly flashed this pillow on the screen, and it says, "With every imaginary death comes a reptilian birth." And just out of the blue, and they make note of it, and that really got me thinking, because we have seen so many deaths. And on that same note, the way that you were saying the programming, when the movie From Hell came out, which was also written by Alan Moore, the same guy who wrote V for Vendetta, it was a story that told of that Jack the Ripper was not prosecuted because he was a Freemason. And basically it seemed like an advertisement to join Freemasonry to become a ritual killer and get away with it. And sure enough, lo and behold, if just a year later, we started seeing the sniper up on the headlines. I lived in Florida when Jaws came out, and I'll tell you what, those beaches were empty. And this should be a dramatic sign, and it was to the elite, of the effect that Hollywood has on the whole system. I mean, why was everybody suddenly afraid of the water? Just because this movie came out, right?
It was the music that scared everybody.
Yeah. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, absolutely. It was, you had just asked me something that I wanted to respond to, too.
Star Wars.
Star Wars, oh yeah. Also now owned by Disney, right? That story has definitely embedded this new concept into people of the Force, which, Christians would relate to a satanic idea of having supernatural powers. But it was, again, in the midichlorians, or in their genetics, in their bloodlines. That's why Darth Vader was based on, had the genetics for it. But the one thing I found really interesting was that they had Anakin Skywalker slaughter all of the children while they executed Order 66, which is, again, the number of the Abyss in Kabbalah, and then they slaughtered all the Jedi, So they put these symbols and signs in all of the messages right there, And, of course, now owned by Disney.
Well, stay tuned for Star Wars Part, 6, 7, 8, and 9, when Luke goes to the dark side.
Yeah.
Well, the key is to watch it with new eyes. So going back or just watching it with the information that you have now, it's good for us to observe what's going on in popular culture so we can share with our friends and have more examples of what we're talking about. I mean, right now there's gobs of examples. I mean, Lady Gaga is a prime example of the trauma-based mind control. And actually, she came to fame when Britney broke down. So this was kind of what was planned out for the rest of Britney's career, was Lady Gaga type things, but she, broke her programming and they couldn't use her in that way anymore, so they had to come up with Lady Gaga.
When you sign a contract in the movie and music industry, it is like selling your soul to the devil. I read about a movie called Rosemary's Baby. It is about a young couple named Rosemary and Guy Woodhouse. Guy is a struggling actor. In the movie, Guy Woodhouse sold his soul to the devil so he could become famous. It is like real-life movie stars and singers. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, well, actually the foundation of black magic is the pact or the contract. So anytime you hear people working in contracts, this goes back to ancient Chaldea and the magic there, signing in blood or whatever. But it was primarily focused on conjuring up spirits from the lower planes by ceremonial magic in order to gain their help or ask their advice about things from the other side. So true black magic is a contract with a demon where the magician becomes a master of the spirit he summoned, and then when he dies, he serves the demon. So that's why these people try to prolong their life as much as possible.
Then you recognize that a corporation is nothing but a black magic spell.
You're so right, Freeman. I think your work is amazing and incredible.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Well, honestly, just the fact that you're doing the show, and I get a lot of inspiration and hope for the future when I see the behavior of kids, because some people I think are just, reprobate beyond help, but I just see so many children waking up and being so responsive to the information, so much more so than a college graduate even. I mean, I think you're smarter than someone who's been to 4 years of college. I went over to someone's house and was talking about the CIA and how they would do something, and the college student says, but the government runs the CIA. Why would they, why would they do anything bad to us? And I was just like, what are they teaching you in school? So I think that if the kids can band together and get this information out, then there's hope.
Yeah.
Well, when you're bold, then you get mighty guardian angels to come to your aid. So don't stop what you're doing.
No, thank you so much, Jamie. You're such a sweetheart. What do you think about traditional weddings?
I think the concept of a wedding is a little bit creepy, just personally, because, all this importance of the white dress and the purity, and everyone knows what you're going to be doing that day, and when you get home, you're a different person. I just think it's kind of creepy that everyone is involved in this ceremony.
Hollywood brainwashes you with weddings.
Oh, that's the biggest racket there is, right? The whole bridal market. Because that is sold to girls as the single most important event of their entire life, is the wedding. So this is what the purpose of a princess getting a prince is, so they can get married, and then the curtain falls, and there's nothing after that, no archetypes for girls to follow. So that's where you get the bridezillas coming in, because there's a disconnect, a skits in their brain, that they're thinking that they're no longer worth anything, or nothing else is ever going to happen that's special in their life after this wedding. So it has to be perfect. It has to be the perfect day, and just causes a lot of stress in the relationship. And then you get the shows like Bridezilla. Yeah, so you got them promoting the weddings big time, but then you said that they're now starting to shift and saying that marriage is not a good thing. You said a teacher or someone.
Yes, teacher.
Yeah. So there's always different steps in the plan, and you have to look ahead to what they're trying to bring next. So first they got the narcissistic princess. They got all the women to deny their femininity, deny nature, deny food, cooking, everything that makes you beautiful, and healthy.
They did that because they had an agenda.
So first they've made marriage a spectacle, and now they're just going to try and do it away with it altogether, because, the communists, and this is pretty much where America's going, down the path of communism. And if you can look at some examples like North Korea or China, this is not somewhere that you want to be going. But they want complete communism, no religion, the state controls everything, no family units. Basically, your family is the government, and you live and die for it.
Yeah, you're so right, Jamie.
People start coming at me with all kinds of, oh my God, did you know this, and did you see this, and it's like, yeah, everything's going according to plan. The problem is it's not your plan, but we can see everything coming down the pipe. And so the critical thing for people to do is to not follow the plan, to go towards nonconformity, but it really only works as a mass. Nonconformity as an individual is a dangerous and poor life, but nonconformity as a network or as a community, it gives us everything we ever wanted, and people just can't see through the programming to turn in that direction.
Yep.
There's a great little book that I think, all kids your age should read, maybe 12 or 13, called The Most Dangerous Superstition by Larkin Rose. And basically, the most dangerous superstition is the belief in authority in any way. So if we could all just, find our sovereignty and realize that no one has the right to govern us no matter what. The earth is for everyone. We all have a right to be left alone and do what we want to do. And anarchy is not chaos. It just means without government, or without what they call archons in the ancient Gnostic teachings, which has to do with the reptilians as well. The motionless controllers are the archons. So anarchy is just being a sovereign person without any...
You're so right, Jamie. Victoria's Secret is named after Queen Victoria of Britain. It seems like she has a secret. It is not just a branding strategy. Victoria's Secret started in the early 70s as a small lingerie shop. in San Francisco. The store was decorated like a Victorian brothel, complete with red leather sofas. Today, when you go to Victoria's Secret, it makes you feel that you are a prostitute. The change rooms look like a prostitute conducting their business transactions. This is truly discrimination against women. People look at this store and do not question it. Could you tell us more about that?
Sure. Well, what we have in America is the opposite of what they have in Islam. So they have this suppression of the feminine. They can't do anything. They can't drive cars. They can't show their face. They can't walk down the street. They can't show their ankles. So this creates a type of culture where all women are viewed as sex objects, and they can't, in that way, they can't express themselves. They can't even take their clothes off when it's really hot, you know. So America has the opposite. We have this, you know, the whore. They have the shrouded women. We have the naked woman. So it's an imbalance on both ends of the spectrum, right? Now, what's interesting about Victoria's Secret is they have their whole clothing line called Pink, right? And I was just working on part of the book called The Pink Invocation, saying why does every product for girls, you know, look like Pepto-Bismol? Why is it, what is this pink that they're talking about? And what I found was that, have you ever heard chakras? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you know your heart chakra is green, and then there's additional chakras. There's a smaller chakra right below your heart chakra is pink, and this has to do with empathy. So in my studies, I'm finding that, you know, the princess programming is all towards narcissism and psychopathy, and what basically is the lack of empathy. Pink chakra allows you to feel the empathy. Green chakra allows you to feel the love. So in the way that they have taken over green as the color for willpower, like in movies like The Green Lantern, I think this pink revolution or this the popularity of the pink is turning it around once again, using that as a princess and as a consumer, and also an easy target. So, okay, pink is ruled by the planet Venus, and it's a receptive color, and it's also slang for a woman's genitals, right? So when you see this juicy pink splashed on a girl's backside, what does that mean to you? It means that they're just targets of degradation, and they're nothing but a pink, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're so right. You're unbalancing us by confusing the sexes.
And why is it a girl's responsibility to, you know, protect the morality of the males around her? I think that's a weird thing to put on a girl, that your body is a dangerous thing and you're supposed to cover it up, you know, unless you invoke a rape on you or she was asking for it or something like that.
You hit it on the nose. I have to agree with you.
Yeah. We get traumatized when we watch movies and cartoons just because we know the keys and the codes to these systems of trauma. And so watching a Disney cartoon or really anything on TV is just like, oh my goodness, look what they're doing. It's like the only thing we can watch nowadays is King of the Hill, because I think that's pretty much the cleanest show I've seen in a long time.
Mm-hmm. And Hollywood creates a movie called The Island. It is about rich people making clones of themselves.
Yes.
And when something goes wrong with their bodies, they get new body parts. You have to ask yourself, why do these elite live so long? Perhaps they have clones of themselves?
Yeah. Freeman does a lot of work on cloning. You know, he has his theories about that maybe that President Obama could be a clone. So, and they're also coming out in the news very recently talking about human cloning.
Yeah, I know.
And so whatever they release in the news is probably, 30, 40-year-old technology right now.
Mm-hmm. I know. It's really...
We're there. People are saying that this is something that we have to worry about in the future. It's happening now. Because what I was talking about was the idea of mind transfer technologies into robots, right? And then as Avatar has brought forward the idea of transferring a mind or a soul into a clone. And I was saying that on the International Space Station at this moment is Robonaut 2, which is a telepresence robot, a robot capable of mind transfer technology. And there have been 16 experiments brought up to the International Space Station, stem cell experiments, to seek immortality. and most especially for the astronauts who seem to age more rapidly in space. So, we're already there. Barack Obama came out and he released the federal restrictions on funding stem cell research, and now they've announced that they've cloned a adult skin cell, which basically opens the door, says yes, absolutely, we can clone humans. So the idea of cloning humans with mind transfer technologies is really where it's all going.
Do you know I find something strange about the word Skype? If you rearrange the letters, it spells spy, and you also get sky and spy. Could you tell my audience more about that?
Well, that's interesting you say that, because the next phase, I think after Princess and Warrior, is Spy Kids.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Because in a communist society, the children tell on their parents. They report back to their teachers about the behaviors of what's been going on at home, and then the government can come arrest them if they've been naughty. So right now we're going to be starting to see a lot more spy kids, and kids turning on their families and their parents to create this, tyrannical communist state.
Mm-hmm. Actually, we even watched that movie at school.
Spy Kids?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I read the book 1984.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real interesting book. It seems like it's happening today. Every little piece of a story.
Well, it's interesting because in 1984 they're all spied on by their televisions, right? By a television screen in their home, and the new, I think it's the Xbox Kinect, is 24-hour surveillance. So it can see infrared, it can detect heartbeats. It's the video game that you can play full body, you know what I'm talking about, the Kinect?
Mm-hmm. No.
So it maps out your body,
yeah.
and you can play as with your body, but it also is monitoring you 24/7, and also has the technology to turn itself off if it sees that too many people in the room are viewing a movie. So if you have a party and you want to watch a movie, if everyone hasn't paid the price for the movie, it can turn itself off if there's too many people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now I remember. Mm-hmm.
Take this to another interesting symbolic representation. You have the idea that in the ancient past, the gods ruled, and the pyramids and the temples to the gods were the biggest buildings in town. Then the church took over, and the steeple of the church was the biggest building in town, until the banks of our modern day then towered over the steeples of the churches. But if you look around today, you will see that the tallest buildings are the telecommunication companies.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
That's the next ruler, the next L or the next Tel, right? And the next Lord is through this television screen and through the fiber optic connections. Strangely enough, Project Bluebeam actually is the concept of transmitting demons into the souls of people through fiber optic lines. And right now we're at that situation again when we have CERN, and they are opening portals to the other dimension and saying that something might come through. We actually just got Google Fiber. We're the first community in Kansas City to get Google Fiber in America, so they're setting up the direct fiber optic lines there. It's yeah.
I have been having paranormal experiences. One example is when I had an interview with Christopher Alvarad. This voice came and said, "Help me." But it is not my first time. I have another one recently. Could you tell my audience what you think about that?
I think that's totally possible, and I think that when you look back at the history of the technologies that are created, they were made by occultists and magicians. The first person who was doing experiments with the cathode ray tube was using it to try and communicate with spirits in the ether, or what they called, the spirit world. Mm-hmm. And his first projection was a Maltese cross, and so he thought that he could have the spirits arranged to the tiny particles, on the other side of the screen to communicate with him. That's how he got the cathode ray tube for television.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Nazis picked it up to try and get one in everybody's home, and a corporation named Telefunken started mass producing televisions for the Nazis so that they could have them in everybody's home. Curiously enough, they also the same company that created the FM radio and the first computer. And then I was going to link that to Disney, but I forgot where I was going with that. Just to finish that thought, the Nazis didn't understand the true power of television until they witnessed Walt Disney's propaganda techniques for World War II and getting Donald Duck to get everybody to pay their income taxes. No one was paying their income taxes until they made a little cartoon of Donald Duck and showing him to pay his taxes, and it got 50% increase. So when Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propagandist, witnessed the power of the cartoon, he started making cartoons of his own for the Nazi youth.
Wow. It's so interesting how that worked.
Not really.
I just know that the Nazis were very much into gathering these ancient artifacts, much like Raiders of the Lost Ark, and that this has played a large role in our situation on planet Earth. So when you start to get to the raid in Iraq, when we stormed the museum in Iraq, the American military, they stole very specific artifacts from the museum. And there's plenty of evidence that suggests that there was a high civilization in the ancient past that the elite seem to know about and has been clouded from history for the rest of us. So,
one book on my shelf that I haven't gotten to yet is called The Spear of Destiny, the occult power behind the spear which pierced the side of Christ and how Hitler inverted the force in a bid to conquer the world. This is by Trevor Ravenscroft. So I'm looking forward to reading the book, but I haven't really cracked it open yet, but that's a good one to get if you're interested in that subject.
Yep.
You see, the Thule Society was hugely into channeling and extra-dimensional beings. And when they started coming out with all these technologies like the Bell Project, which opened portals to another dimension like CERN, or their flying saucers, or many of the other things, and perhaps they even had the atomic bomb, some believe, but even just their rocketry and everything that they brought to America and Project Paperclip, when they asked the Nazis how they came up with these amazing technologies, they replied that they had help from the other side.
Hellboy is a good movie to watch about that.
Really? During this interview, we have been interrupted by very unusual sounds.
Well, just remember this. If there are demonic entities, then there are twice as many good angels. Yeah. Because, in the Bible it says that only a third of the angels are fallen, so we outnumber them 2 to 1.
Seriously, my whole life has been based on synchronicity. God has had a major hand in directing my life. I was one without direction, something that the world says is a bad thing, But I went out, like I said, juggling across the United States, and every instance led me to the next instance, and every moment led to the next moment, and my life was filled with ideas and with experiences that I would never even known that existed, and everything just seemed to be so perfect in so many ways that I would get someone to show up right when I needed someone to take me somewhere, and they were going exactly where I was going, things of this nature. Something that the road people talk a lot about. We call it road magic, and now it's more commonly known as synchronicity. And I can testify, verify, well, I can't verify it because only you can, but I can testify to the fact that synchronicity is a true force in our lives, and that everything within the quote-unquote real world is there to distract you from your true soul's purpose, which would be open through following this anarchy or this synchronistic path.
You're so right, Freeman. It seems like the Batman movie has gone to the dark side, but it keeps getting darker and darker. One actor even lost his life.
Yeah, because there's so many things inside of that story. First of all, the very storyline of The Dark Knight Rises Now, we have been talking about the Dark Hero for quite some time, long before The Dark Knight Rises came out. You can see talks that I've done on the Dark Hero programming. So that's the opposite side of the princess programming and what goes to Aleister Crowley's Age of Horus. But so the Dark Hero and the Dark Knight Rises, actually, if you were to read the comic book itself, now I study a lot of this stuff to see where, because a lot of the programming comes into comic books too, you know, it's all there actually.
Yeah, how many comic characters have two parents?
Yeah, right. Yeah. They definitely a dissolution of the family in comic book characters. But in that very story, when Batman has his back broken, in the comic book, he gets replaced by a character named Azrael. And if you know, Azrael is actually the fallen angel that taught warfare and fashion to the ancients in the Book of Enoch, when you start to look into this. So a fallen angel took over for the Batman suit in the comic book version of The Dark Knight Rises at that point. Azrael finally has to be defeated by Bruce Wayne again because the public weren't ready for a bloody, vicious Batman. Because the next Batman that followed after The Dark Knight fell was a vicious killer that ripped spines out of people. And this is something that Batman fans have never seen. You know, Batman doesn't kill. He's the detective. He's the hero. He's not a killer. So when this Azrael took over, they were kind of testing the public to see how vicious we had become, and they found that they had to bring Bruce Wayne back into the storyline. Now, you know, when you start looking at certain characters in Hollywood, you'll see that some of them, you know, really play into the role as much as they are the role. Because one like Ray Liotta, he's one to me that's definitely a dark character. But what's his name that played Batman? Christian Bale. Oh my God, you know, this guy, he comes out and he's beating up his mom and his sister. You know, you can see the darkness in their eyes, and those are the ones that tend to get propelled. I'll be very curious as to what Christopher Nolan does with the new Superman. I guarantee you it's going to be a dark hero.
Yeah. You have pointed out a lot of things that are right.
So what they're doing is trying to control your response to information that you would get in waking up. You know, you learn about Monsanto, you learn about Federal Reserve or whatever, and you start to get angry at what's been done to you. And so they're trying to tell you that the only way to lash out is to become this dark hero and to wreak vengeance on the evil ones. But in my opinion, everybody is just, you know, a mind-controlled slave that's propagating this evilness. And so if you can see them, they're not your enemy.
Yeah.
The only cure for mind control is and trauma-based is security, or, you know, a hug. So to go against these villains, to say that, okay, you start pointing your finger at different villains. It's the UN, it's the Jesuits, it's the Jews, and you start pointing your finger at them, and then you're trained or conditioned to want to then be a vigilante against them. And when your actual answer should be going and giving them a hug and making them feel secure.
Or just recognizing your own sovereignty and realizing that you don't have to take back your rights from authority. You just have to exercise them. You know, people march against Monsanto, and I really love that, you know, the worldwide protest that happened yesterday against Monsanto. And that's interesting because Disney and Monsanto have been in bed since the beginning, you know, propagating the plastic house and the kitchen of the future where you can keep your different irradiated foods and everything's made of...
Strangely enough, I'm not going to just add one thing to that. I'm sorry. You know, you go to Disney and you're actually conditioned and programmed there at, say, Disney World. So when you get off of RCA's Space Mountain, the roller coaster, and you're all traumatized and somewhat of a post-traumatic stress state, they then kind of put you on this people mover, and they show you your future. And I have seen this so many times because I grew up in Orlando. And you would go through and they'd show you this Monsanto house of the future and what your future would be. So the whole goal was to traumatize you on the ride and then program you to want this next future. Mm-hmm. Sorry, carry on.
But you can't just protest. You have to do something counteractive to that, which is grow a garden. If you hate Monsanto, you hate GMOs, and you want to live healthy, then you have to take that in your own hands. You can't just demand a freedom from someone who doesn't care about you. You just have to do it yourself.
You're so right.
Well, the thing about Monsanto is, they're the ones who brought us the chemical, Agent Orange and mustard gas and these other horrific pesticides and biological warfare. So why is our food coming from a biological warfare company? That's a good question to ask anybody.
Yeah, then on top of that, the patenting of everything. And so now we have Angelina Jolie cutting off her breast because they believe in this gene, but it's really promoting the idea of gene patenting, which is as scary as having your food patent.
Which goes to a movie called Gattaca, where the world is segregated into different classes of people, the genetically modified people and the regular people, and the genetically modified people get the good jobs and get to go into space, and the people who are conceived naturally are lower class. So this is all coming in the future, but you can watch it how they programmed it to you in the past, with a movie like Gattaca. What the heck is a Terminator seed? I mean, they made a seed that would only produce one crop and then it would die, and that's pretty much the most horrific thing I can think of.
Especially since these plants take over the other plants in their genetics, and then everything becomes a terminated seed.
Yeah, they program it into you before it happens. Yeah, that's what they do.
Absolutely. I mean, the Obama administration were depicted as the characters of Stargate, the TV show back in 1996. They're identical. It's crazy. So how much into the future are they? How much do they know? Are they time traveling? These questions are really starting to come to the surface for me.
Yeah. But it's always better to ask questions than not to.
Yeah, the conditioning that's going into the youth of today is to accept whatever answer that your brain can generate. So it's gotten to the point where you're not allowed to say, I don't know. And I've watched this over and over, especially in the college students, where they will make up an answer and then believe it wholeheartedly because they cannot admit that they do not know.
Yeah.
And not knowing is the greatest gift ever.
The James Bond movies really have a lot of symbolism.
James Bond was another part of this very schedule, and the number 007 was actually the military intelligence number of John Dee, who would channel Enochian angels and came out with a whole new form of magic and a new system of communicating with otherworldly beings. But the first character written into the first villain written into a James Bond novel was based on Aleister Crowley. I'm telling you, this guy he is at the heart of everything that is the 20th century, and James Bond's no different. But when you open up Ian Fleming's Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, a story he wrote for his son, you then clearly see where this man stands as these poor children are taken off by a child kidnapper for the Queen. And the trauma base that's all written into the children's side of this through Ian Fleming, who wrote Chitty Chitty Bang Bang as well.
Princess Diana said that the Queen would make her watch Chitty Chitty Bang Bang every year to traumatize her.
Really? I didn't know that. Did she really? Wow.
Yeah.
Really? Oh my God. What stories that actually I never knew about. Wow. In Canada, the heads of states are the royal family. When I did a project on Princess Diana, the kids could care less about her dying. They care more about when she was born, and I already told them that. When I was talking about Diana, I felt like the subject was tabooed. I felt like there was a agenda on forgetting Diana.
It's interesting that you say that because in the Bohemian Grove world, the elites meet once a year and they do rituals under a 30-foot stone owl. The ritual is called the cremation of care.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what they're doing is they're getting rid of all their empathy, all their emotions, all their feeling of oneness between humans, and they burn their care so they can continue on with their, evil plot.
Oh, wow, that's horrible that they actually would do that. And it's really working because I see it even in school. When I used to go to school, why they didn't give a care if you got bullied. They didn't give a care about anything. Once they laughed when someone got hurt. Why are they trying to take away care?
Because that would mean that they couldn't continue with what they're doing if they actually cared about people. They couldn't go along with their programs of eugenics and depopulation and vaccines and flu shots and, third world oppression. So you can't care if you want to keep living like you're living. And in adults, it's really hard because they're just so busy trying to survive. I mean, that's what the goal is of the destruction of the middle class, get everybody in a survival mode. And that's actually, part of the reptilian brain. So you were kind of talking about why is television like that, because they want it to apply to our reptilian brain, which functions things like the sex drive, ritualistic behavior, auto functions of your body like breathing and heartbeat, and also your survival fight or flight. So they want everybody in fight or flight so they can't utilize the other two parts of their brain, the neocortex where care comes from.
The psychopath elite that are in charge, as I was saying, are all genetically related, and or they have been produced through these trauma-based rituals inside of secret societies. So if you ask why these elite would want to do this to the humans, because I don't consider these guys human, they don't understand us, and we are chaos to them. Concepts of love and synchronicity are so beyond them that they can't control it. And their genetic structure is this need, this reptilian brain need to control every faction, every action of existence on Earth. And it really boils down to the bloodlines and to the genetics of those that are given authority.
What would be a good project for someone your age is to do a study about where do toys come from, because I wrote this section in the book Weird Stuff, and I noticed that it was resonating a lot with the little kids, because the truth is that most toys come from China and third world countries that are made in slave labor, where they're losing parts of their body, melting plastic, they have no gloves, they have no masks, they work in horrible conditions where they're not allowed to go to the bathroom. And these are, they have to sleep at their desks because they don't get off work till 2 a.m. and they have to start back at 6 a.m. And these are kids your age. So I noticed that when we talk about this, the children are totally starting to reject this corporate mass-produced toys because they feel for the kids on the other side who have to make them, who are just their age.
Could you give us your info?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything I've ever done over the last 8 years of producing is on freemantv.com. And I really hope to turn it into the Freeman TV network, and we start producing some popular culture, mind-altering, paradigm-shifting entertainment or infotainment for everyone. So freemantv.com. I update it nearly daily, and it's always, it could take you 10 years to get through all that I already have on there. And the friendshipagenda.com is our little social network where we like to gather. Everything you need from me is on freemantv.com, and even the links to everywhere else.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any books?
We have our first book called Weird Stuff, and so a lot of the things that we've been talking about today are in part 1 of Weird Stuff, and I'm working on part 2 right now, but it's basically a magician's guide to understanding popular culture. So I walk you through the history of magic and what is magic, and is it real, and how can you do it, and sorcery, what's the difference between a magician and a sorcerer? A sorcerer wants to control people's minds on a grand scale. A magician really doesn't care about what other people think. So I've devise my own system of magic that I write out in the book called Slack Magic. It's a little bit Christianity, a little bit Taoism, a little bit Church of the Subgenius, and I think that it can resonate with a lot of different people because it's just creating good things in your life based on positive thinking, things like that. So part 1 is out right now. If you're a teenager, I really encourage you to get it because it's really friendly. It has a lot of pictures. It's in a tabloid magazine format, which I did on purpose because tabloids are so huge. It's a hardcover, but it's kind of like a magazine inside. And a lot of the topics are easily understandable. I don't think I go over anybody's head in this first book. I really just lay the groundwork for what we're talking about in a very convincing way.
So you can just do a search for weird stuff, or you can find it on freemantv.com.
Thank you for coming on to Crystal Kids Radio Show. It was truly a pleasure having you on my radio show, and I hope to have you back on my radio show in the near future.
Oh,
Hopefully.
definitely. Anytime, Ellie. Yeah, you ask great questions.
Great time.
My friends have come and gone, but that don't mean nothing. See, I might be lying, I might say, just not too deep. It seems that I've said too much,
another Crystal Like Kids Radio. Today we are at Studio J, where I will be interviewing a special guest who has a true story to tell us. We are going to have a learning experience, and you will listen to a very great voice. Chris's wife is a singer.
Yes, I am. Hello, and thank you.
Yeah. Hello, Chris. What do you do for a living?
I'm a professional musician, and at the moment I'm recording an album at Studio J with my wife Krista and the rest of our band Social Animals.
Mm-hmm. I understand that you were an illegal immigrant that came to Canada. Example, how did you live as an illegal immigrant in Canada?
Well, that stage of my life was about 12 years long. I came here and I married a Canadian girl in 1997. It wasn't Krista, it was my first wife, and we were divorced very quickly, and I was stranded in a foreign country without landed status with the Canadian immigration. So I had no medical coverage, no dental coverage, I couldn't get any social insurance, any help with unemployment, and I wasn't allowed to work. So it was a very difficult time, and I survived. To answer your question, I survived on the kindness of friends, doing work where I was paid cash instead of being on the books, and it was a struggle.
And not to mention that your dog was your only companion.
Yes, I brought my German Shepherd named Zach with me from Australia, and that's one of the reasons I didn't immediately just turn around and fly home. One, because I didn't have the money, but two, because Zach was my responsibility, and it was too difficult to take him back to Australia, so I wanted to stay here and let him live out his life as well. So that was one of the decisions that kept me here.
That's very sad.
Yes, it was a sad time.
What did the government do to you?
Well, when they eventually caught me, I had already married Krista. This was
about 2 months after we had married.
This was in 2010. Yes, 2010. Yeah. And we had secured a lawyer to handle our immigration issue, but unfortunately before the application was submitted to the government, the immigration people caught up with me. They arrested and detained me in a place called Rexdale, which was, I call it an immigration jail. It's where they take everybody that's overstayed their welcome or their visa in Canada, and they lock them up. It's just like jail. And
I would say how they arrested you with what they put the on you.
Okay, so yeah, it wasn't like they just said, you have overstayed your welcome, come with us. They pushed me up against a wall. They showed their identification, and then they handcuffed me and took me back to their station, took all my fingerprints, took all my ID away from me, and then transported me in shackles up to this place in Rexdale.
I was not allowed to see him or follow or anything. I was left without any information for about 2 days.
And then when I was being processed in Hamilton before going to Rexdale, I explained my situation, that we had a lawyer, and they weren't interested at all, but I demanded that they call my lawyer and talk to her, and it made no difference. They still took me away.
How are the people being treated in this place you ended up in?
It was extremely disturbing to be there because I was only there for 2 days, and those 2 days were horrible. Lonely and horrible. We were only allowed outside for 1 hour a day, and when we came back in they would search us and take us through metal detectors in case we found anything in the yard. It was just like what you see on TV about jail. But there are other people in there who had been in there for 3 months, and I just couldn't imagine how awful their lives were. I was fortunate enough that when the 2 days were finished, I was put before an immigration judge and was allowed to explain my case, and I volunteered to go back to my home country of Australia and to pay for my own ticket, and that we would continue our application process outside the country, and he accepted that and released me. But I still had to report once a week to the immigration people, and then when the deportation date arrived, they escorted me to the plane. They gave all my documents to one of the airline stewards, and I wasn't allowed to get anything back until I reached Australia.
And the people that were in the immigration jail, there was a separation of two parts. There was women and children in one area, and then men in another area. And I remember coming in with a change of clothes for him, and there was another gentleman that was coming in with a box with diapers and cookies and toys for whoever it was that he was giving this box to, which had to be checked through by the immigration security for weapons or whatever wasn't allowed to go through. And they took the box into the other room, and about maybe 20 minutes later, this box comes back out. They took the diapers and they left the cookies and the toys, so they weren't allowed to bring in any cookies or toys for these poor kids that are sitting in this jail, not knowing what's going on. This is their new home until they are deported. It was quite sad.
Yeah,
it was quite sad. Miserable.
Tell us about the children. What happened to the children? How did they treat these poor kids?
Well, like I was saying before, we were only allowed outside for 1 hour a day. And from my window to where my bedroom was, if you could call it a bedroom, I could see at a different hour of the day they would let the women and children out. So, I mean, you've grown up, you know what you need to be outside, and these kids were only out there for 1 hour a day, and the rest of the time they sat around with their distraught mother wondering what was going on. And a lot of these people had bigger issues than I did. My issue was simply I made a mistake. I stayed here too long, passed my visa, and I paid the penalty for doing so, and that was okay. Understandable, at least. But some of these people, I don't know their particular situations, but for somebody who had been in there for 3 months, that means that they have once a week seen the immigration judge, like I did, and the judge's decision has been further incarceration in this facility. And that was disturbing, because to think of these kids being locked up in a room like that for 3 months is, it's disturbing, like I said.
Yeah. Were these people drug dealers, and why were the kids locked up?
It was, no, they were, as far as I know, no. If they were criminals and they had committed offences that the Canadian government considered against the law, they would be in real jail. These people were just like me. Maybe they had more difficult stories than mine, and they were staying in Canada for refuge from difficult situations in their own country. I don't know, but all it was overstaying the visa. So whether they were running away from their own country and dangers there, I don't know. But the biggest crimes that they committed was overstaying in Canada.
Really? What happened to Canada? We never did things like that. If you killed somebody, I would understand, but they didn't. No,
and this is the thing. In Canada's history, you've had a very welcoming immigration policy. After the Second World War, for instance, Canada invited people from all over the world to come to Canada. They would assign them a piece of land. They welcomed with open arms immigrants, and immigrants is one portion of society that built Canada into what it is by their hard work, and so it seems a little hypocritical to punish people now for wanting to come here. But like I said, in my case, I did knowingly disobey the law. I stayed too long. So, but yeah, these other people, I think many of them had much tougher stories than me,
and probably didn't have the money to return home too, which was more the reason why they would have to stay at the immigration jail for as long as they had, because they were waiting. The government would have to put the money towards flying them back to their home country, and so they're waiting for that process to happen, and sometimes it doesn't happen for months.
There was a big investigative process that went on as well. Once you were lodged at this place and processed by the immigration officer or the border security people that actually pick you up, then all your information goes into the system, and they further investigate you to make sure, like you were saying, whether you are a criminal. And if you're a criminal even in your own country, they'll find out about it, so that you will go back to your own country and face prosecution there. So that's why I say I don't think these people were drug dealers or murderers or anything like that, because they wouldn't be there. They would have been shipped straight out to jail.
The poor children. It's just disgusting.
It really is.
That's what your memory as a child is going to be for however long. It's going to be that time that you spent with barbed wire, quite literally barbed wire in a yard.
I was there for 2 days, and I tell you, I nearly went out of my mind because it was so confining. I felt like I was in prison, and for a very petty crime.
And not to mention, I came to visit Chris, and we were thinking, oh, we'd be able to touch each other and give each other a hug and a kiss, at least, and we found each other separated with plexiglass, like a real jail.
And we had to talk through a telephone.
Through the telephone. We weren't allowed to touch. We weren't allowed to do anything. They filed them in like a line, and
but we did make a big joke of it though.
Yeah.
When we were talking on the telephone, it reminded us of all the movies that you see of people in jail, and so we put our hands up and go,
I love you.
I love you. I love you. We made a big joke out of it. We had to laugh.
You have to laugh through it. It was just so ridiculous. It was laughable.
It seems like a jail.
It really was.
It really was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really was.
The way you describe it, it just sounds like a jail.
Yeah. It really was.
And then they torture people by putting them in the dark. It's just horrible.
Well, I'll tell you another interesting thing about it too. All the guards were, and there was a lot of them. At every stage, every doorway, there was guards everywhere. And it was interesting, even the separation of races and religions between the guards. You would have Sikhs, so you would have a group of Sikh guards with their headgear on, and they patrolled one sort of section all together. They didn't mingle with all the other guards. And then you would have maybe Jamaican type guards, and then some Indian guards, and they all sort of stuck to themselves. So it was really comical to me to be in a place where I've disobeyed an immigration law, and so I'm taken from society and put in jail.
Like and then I associate with anybody.
And then I was talking to this one guy. He was from Jamaica. He was in the detention facility with me, and he was telling me, because he'd been there for ages, and he was saying, okay, you see that group of guards over there? They love me. You, not so much. Mm-hmm. And so even inside the facility, there was still prejudice.
Mm-hmm. First of all, Krista, I love your voice.
Oh,
it sounds fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that.
You're welcome.
It's really sweet.
I would like to ask you a few questions.
Absolutely.
How did you get started?
How did I get started? I got started in singing, or just the enjoyment of singing. I used to sing for my dad and my stepmom, and they just let me dance around and sing to the opera Carmen, and I would love doing that, and dressing up in these gypsy outfits that my stepmother would have, and so I found a lot of love for singing and entertaining at a young age. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until my teens, when I was in high school, I played with a few bands in the basement. You know, we never made it out of the basement because it was just one of those kind of kid band things. And then it stopped for a while, and I had a lot of years where I didn't do anything. It wasn't until my late 20s that I started, that I got into a blues band. It was more when I had moved to Hamilton, and it was the first blues band I'd ever got into, and I'd learned so much from the guys that were much older than I was, and much more experienced in music. It taught me a lot, and that has sort of harnessed my performance through them. And then I was doing a lot of cover music though, so I really loved doing a lot of Irma Thomas and Big Mama Thornton, and you know, the really cool sisters. And it wasn't until later on that I started writing original music, when Chris and I had met. And all of that time beforehand just was getting you ready. It was getting me ready, I think. Yeah. But I've been singing my whole life, but just hadn't done it as serious until quite into my 20s. So yeah.
Is this business very hard?
Yes. It's hard if you want it to be hard. I mean, it's all in how much passion you have to do it. If you want to do it, and you want to make it, if you want to push it, you have to do that yourself. And it doesn't have to be difficult. It's known to be difficult, but it doesn't have to be. And I think it's all in passion, how much passion you have to push yourself, how much drive you have within you to keep going and saying, this is what I do and this is what I want to do. I don't want to do anything else but music, and this is fun.
And the belief and confidence in the music that you're writing too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which means you have to write music that you are passionate about.
That's right, and you write what you know. Yeah.
How did you feel about the immigration problems with your husband?
Oh, it was devastating. How did I feel about it? Oh yeah, devastated. I'm really grateful for technology because we had Skype when he was back in Australia. We were able to talk every day. But it was devastating. I didn't know what to do. When he was taken away, I literally crumbled to the ground and cried. And I couldn't stand up. My legs would not let me stand up. They wanted me in a ball, and I couldn't do anything. I didn't know what to do.
We were separated for a whole year.
And and for a couple, when Chris and I met, we have not spent a day apart, an hour apart. We have been together for 6 years continuously without a break. And so that 1 year, and knowing that he was going to be gone for a year, it was quite devastating. But we laughed through it. Again, going back to the laughter, it was just so ridiculous. It was funny. So we made laughs about it.
But if there's a moral to the immigration story, it's this. For a few years that we were together, the immigration issue that I had was something that we had no power to resolve, or we felt powerless to resolve.
We felt powerless to resolve, yeah, we didn't have the resources.
When I got caught and I got sent home, looking back on it, as difficult as it was, now I'm a legal permanent resident, and the problem is resolved. And it was an issue that we didn't think we had the power to resolve. So looking back, getting caught was probably the best thing that could have happened.
And we look back at it and we say, it was just a moment in time, and it really is, isn't it? In the end, it's just a moment in time, and then you move on. And that's what happens.
Yeah.
And it's all for the best.
Yeah,
right?
It is for the best.
Yeah.
Can you play one of your songs?
Absolutely.
I'd love to.
When Krista and I first met, this is how we discovered that we could write music together. We met, and 30 minutes later, we had written our first song, and that's the one we'll play you. It's called Bewitching Fold. And the way it happened was, I said to Krista, because I knew she sang, I said, do you want to try and write a song? And she said, sure, how would that work? And I said, well, I'll play some chords and you'll have some words. And I thought it would be that simple, and it really was. And this song, as I say, 30 minutes later it was born, so we'll play you that. Still sounds reasonably tuned.
It does.
It goes like this.
I kept you warm, but I could not hold. No, no, no. I kept you warm. This aspiration. Oh.
Yeah, so that was our first song. It always gives us a little kick to play that
Yeah,
out live because
sure does.
it was such a meaningful little experience when we first met. So.
Yeah, yeah. It's nice to see it come to life and to keep doing it, yeah.
That was wonderful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. And that's exactly the purpose of writing music is to play it and have other people enjoy it as well.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, we enjoy the creative process, but ultimately it's about sharing it with other people.
Yeah.
So if you like
And
it,
the
then
reaction to it, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Sharing
that's
it,
the
yeah.
best compliment ever, is you
Yes.
say, I love that.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you.
Yeah. Your singing is just fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
And you play the guitar very well.
Well, thank you very much.
He does, yes. Yeah. You're very
So
sweet.
Krista and I, we feel very lucky to have met each other, you know, coming from opposite sides of the world, about as far away as you can get from one another. And then we met and we realised that we could write songs together, and that's pretty special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And plus we love each other, so that's even
Yeah.
more special.
Yeah.
And it makes all the problems worthwhile. And then you have a lot of things to write about as well, because you have experiences, both good and bad, so you put them into your songs, and hopefully that comes across to the audience. And
That's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
Your song is just so good.
well, thanks.
Thank you so much.
I wish you had an album. I would buy it.
Well, it won't be long.
Soon enough. Yeah. Soon enough.
Jordan Abraham at Studio J is producing our album now, and he's really helping us to...
He's such a wonderful guy.
Jordan is awesome.
And he's helping us, with his experience and his production knowledge, he's helping us to turn our songs from just an acoustic guitar and our voices into a full band. And that's because that's what we want, the songs to be really big. And
Evolving.
so Social Animals was actually born in this studio. And because Social Animals is the name of our band, and it was born here, and it keeps building, and the songs keep getting better, and we're really enjoying the recording process and learning about it all.
Yeah. So true.
You're going to become famous. I know it.
Well, I hope so.
I hope some people. Yeah.
But
someday.
your voice is fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying so.
You know,
It's
one
so
of the-
nice and loud.
It is pretty loud sometimes, yeah.
One of the things that we want to be able to do through our music is to go back to Australia and have a tour there.
Yeah.
And
Love to do that. It's on the list.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you for coming on to Crystal Kids Radio, Krista and Chris.
it was our pleasure.
It was our pleasure, absolutely.
And I hope to have you back in the near future. Remember, people are not numbers. We are people.
Absolutely.
That's right. How very true.
And the immigration process processed me as a number, and it made me feel like a number. So I'm
And
glad.
you're not a number.
No, I'm glad to be back here as a permanent resident, because now I can do anything I want. I feel for the people who are not, just because of the way the law changes every now and then, and it affects, one little change in the law can affect a whole bunch of people.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me on Crystal Kids Radio. Support us, kids, on Crystal Kids Radio's Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Please support us, kids, because it takes a lot of work doing it, and it comes from my heart. Change starts from the children. Peace, love, and harmony. See you next week at the same time, same place. Love you all.